Have you ever stood at the edge of something so impossible that your mind couldn't process it? That moment when everything you thought you knew about life gets turned upside down? That was me at 16 years old, lying on a cold hospital bed, watching confusion spread across the faces of medical professionals who had seen it all. Stay with me till the end, because what I'm about to share is no fiction, but a real-life story. Mine to be specific. It will shake you to the core, but more than that, I'm hoping God speaks to someone through it. Before we dive into this story, I want to ask you something. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Let's connect as a family across nations and continents. Your comment isn't just a number to me. It's a reminder that we're all part of God's global family, and we need to keep praying for each other, especially for our brothers and sisters facing persecution around the world. My name is Miguel, and I grew up in a coastal town in southern Portugal where the ocean breeze carried the smell of salt and grilled sardines through narrow cobblestone streets. When I was 4 years old, my parents made a decision that would shape my entire childhood. They dedicated me to the Lord during a small ceremony at our local church, promising to raise me in the ways of faith. For years, everything seemed perfect. My parents were deeply involved in ministry, traveling to small villages and towns, sharing the gospel, praying for the sick, and encouraging struggling believers. I tagged along to countless services, prayer meetings, and evangelistic events. I watched people cry as they encountered God's presence. I saw healings. I heard testimonies that seemed too miraculous to be true. But somewhere around my 14th year, something shifted inside me. The faith that surrounded me began to feel like a cage rather than freedom. I looked at my friends outside the church and saw them laughing, experimenting, living what seemed like real life while I was stuck in a bubble of worship songs and Bible studies. The opportunity for change came through volleyball. At 14, I was already tall for my age, and when I joined the school team, coaches started noticing my potential. Within months, I was invited to play for a regional youth team. This was my ticket out, or so I thought. Playing volleyball meant new friends. These friends introduced me to weekend parties where music pounded through speakers until dawn. I tasted my first drink at 15. Someone offered me a cigarette at a beach bonfire, and I accepted, coughing through the smoke while trying to look cool. Girls started paying attention to me. The attention felt intoxicating. My parents were too busy with ministry to notice the changes. I became skilled at living two lives: the good church kid on Sundays and the rebellious teenager the rest of the week. I told myself I was just gathering experiences, collecting stories that would one day make my testimony more interesting. Deep down, I believed I could return to God whenever I wanted, armed with dramatic tales of redemption. Everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon during practice. I jumped to spike the ball and landed awkwardly. Pain shot through my left leg like electricity. I tried to walk it off, but something felt wrong. By evening, my leg was swollen, and the pain had intensified from uncomfortable to unbearable. My mother drove me to the hospital the next morning. After x-rays and several examinations, a doctor asked me to step outside while he spoke privately with my parents. I sat in the waiting room, scrolling through my phone, assuming I had a bad sprain or maybe a fracture. When my parents emerged, my mother's eyes were red. My father's face looked like stone. The doctor called me back in and explained, in words I struggled to understand, that they had found a cancerous tumor in my left leg. The word cancer echoed in my mind like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. The doctor talked about treatment options, specialists, and possibilities. The word amputation floated through the conversation like a ghost. I heard myself asking if I could still play volleyball with a prosthetic leg. The doctor gave me a sad smile and said we should focus on treatment first. The next 6 months became a blur of hospital visits, painful tests, and consultations with different specialists. My parents took me to church, and our pastor organized weekly prayer meetings specifically for my healing. Every Tuesday night, the congregation gathered to pray for Miguel and his cancerous tumor. I participated in these prayer meetings with a divided heart. Part of me desperately wanted to believe God would heal me. Another part felt like a fraud. How could I ask God for a miracle when I had spent the last year running from him? The guilt sat heavy on my chest during those prayer sessions. Months passed. More tests, more consultations. The tumor remained. Doctors began seriously discussing amputation as the most viable option. I started accepting this as my new reality. I would lose my leg. My volleyball dreams would end. This would be my story. Then came the final examination before my scheduled surgery, a detailed scan that would map out the exact parameters of the tumor for the surgical team. The technician positioned me inside a large machine that hummed and clicked around my body. After 20 minutes, I was pulled out. The technician looked at the images, frowned, and told me to wait. He left the room and returned with a doctor. They studied the screen together, speaking in hushed tones. The doctor asked them to run the scan again. Another 20 minutes inside the machine. When I emerged this time, the doctor was on the phone, calling in another specialist. Within an hour, 5 doctors crowded around the imaging computer in that small room. I sat on the examination table in my hospital gown, watching them gesture at the screen, their voices a mixture of confusion and disbelief. My heart pounded. Had the tumor grown? Was it worse than they thought? Finally, the lead doctor turned to me and asked if I was experiencing any pain in my leg. I told him no, which was true. The pain had actually disappeared over the past few weeks. He exchanged glances with the other doctors, then looked back at me with an expression I couldn't read. He told me they couldn't locate the tumor, the growth that had been clearly visible in every previous scan, the mass that had dominated 6 months of my life, the cancer that was supposed to cost me my leg. It was gone, completely vanished. The doctors kept using the word unprecedented. They wanted to run more tests. They needed time to understand what had happened. My father drove me home in silence that afternoon. I should have been celebrating, shouting with joy, calling all my friends. Instead, I felt hollow. As we pulled into our driveway, I thanked my father and headed straight to my room. I sat on my bed, alone in the house, and pulled out my phone to text my volleyball teammates. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't type. A weight pressed down on my chest, not physical pain, but something deeper. I had just experienced a medically impossible miracle, and all I could think about was getting back to volleyball and parties. Something was profoundly wrong with me. My eyes drifted to my desk where an old Bible sat buried under notebooks and magazines. I hadn't opened it in over a year. I walked over and picked it up, feeling the weight of it in my hands. When I opened it randomly, my eyes fell on words from the prophet Isaiah about God doing a new thing. Those words ignited something in my chest. Tears started flowing before I understood why I was crying. I knelt beside my bed, something I hadn't done since I was a little child, and spoke out loud to a God I wasn't sure was listening. I told him I was sorry for running. I admitted I had been living like he didn't exist while secretly hoping he did. I confessed that I had no idea how to follow him, but that I wanted to try. I promised that if he was real, if this relationship was real, I would give him everything. No more half-hearted church attendance. No more double life. What happened next is difficult to explain to anyone who hasn't experienced it. The room didn't change. I didn't hear an audible voice, but I felt something like warm water being poured over my head, flowing down through my entire body. The tears increased, but they weren't sad tears. Old wounds I know I was carrying, harsh word from church members, disappointments, judgments, pain from watching my parents struggle. All of it seemed to lift away like smoke. I stayed on my knees for over an hour, crying and feeling loved in a way I had never experienced before. The miracle of my tumor disappearing suddenly made sense. God hadn't just healed my leg. He was healing all of me. The next weeks brought difficult decisions. I had to tell my volleyball teammates I was stepping back from team. I had to distance myself from friends whose entire lives revolved around parties and activities I could no longer participate in. Some of them understood. Others thought I had become a religious fanatic. My mother noticed a change immediately. She found me reading my Bible one morning and started crying. She told me she had been praying for this moment since I was 14 years old, watching me drift away while feeling powerless to stop it. My mother had been a worship leader for years, and she had always tried to teach me music. I had learned guitar and piano as a child, but I never took it seriously. Now, with volleyball gone from my life, I felt God drawing me toward music in a new way, not just playing instruments, but using them to lead others into worship. I started attending worship team rehearsals at church. At first, I just played guitar in the back. But as months passed, the worship leader began asking me to lead songs. Eventually, I was leading entire worship services. Something supernatural happened when I led worship. I would share my testimony about the tumor that vanished, and people in the congregation would be healed of their own sicknesses. I watched as chronic pain disappeared. Tumors shrank, and broken bodies were restored. The miracle that saved my leg was multiplying into countless other miracles. My parents invited me to travel with them on ministry trips. We went to Spain, France, and eventually Brazil, where my grandparents still lived. Everywhere we went, I led worship and shared my story. Everywhere we went, people encountered God's healing power. 2 years after my healing, during a prayer time, I heard God speak clearly to my heart. He told me it was time to stop, time to leave Portugal and step into something new. The phrase that kept repeating in my mind was that he was giving me a land of kings and queens. I didn't understand what that meant until circumstances miraculously aligned for my family to move to England. We ended up in Birmingham, a city completely different from my coastal Portuguese town. The culture was different. The weather was different. Even the church was different. We joined an Anglican congregation that met in a building hundreds of years old. But God had prepared me for this moment. Every experience in Portugal, every lesson learned, every song written, it all made sense in England. I joined the church staff and continued leading worship, watching as God moved powerfully in this new land. Today, when people ask me who Jesus is to me, I tell them he's my anchor. Life still gets intense. Waves still rise. Storms still come. But Jesus holds me steady no matter how fierce the wind blows or how high the waves climb. I think about that 16-year-old boy who thought he needed wild stories to make faith interesting. I didn't know that the greatest story would be the simplest one. A God who loved me enough to chase me down, heal my body, transform my heart, and give me purpose beyond anything I could have imagined. The tumor that threatened my leg became the catalyst that saved my life. A message for you. As you've read Miguel's story, I want you to know that God is still doing miracles today. Around the world, Christians are facing persecution for their faith, imprisonment, torture, and even death for refusing to deny Jesus. Please join me in praying for our persecuted brothers and sisters. They need our prayers and support. If you've never given your life to Jesus, I want to invite you to do that right now. You can pray something simple like this. Lord Jesus, I believe you are real. I believe you died for my sins and rose again. I'm sorry for living life my own way. Today I choose to follow you. Come into my heart and make me new. I surrender my life to you. Amen. If you prayed that prayer, welcome to the family. Please comment below and let us know. We want to celebrate with you and help you take next steps in your faith journey. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to this channel for more powerful testimonies of God's faithfulness.